The soldier who chose to die so his friends could live. September 13, 1944. A wheat field in eastern France. A small American patrol is pinned down by German machine gun fire. They're trapped. Can't advance. Can't retreat. The Germans have them in a kill zone, and it's only a matter of time before they're all dead. One man stands up. He knows what's about to happen. He knows he won't survive the next 30 seconds. But he also knows that if he doesn't do this, his friends will die. He picks up his rifle. He starts running toward the German machine gun nest, alone, across open ground, directly into enemy fire. His friends are screaming at him to get down. The Germans are firing everything they have at him. Bullets are hitting the ground and his feet. But he keeps running. He throws a grenade. It lands perfectly in the German position. Explosion. The machine gun stops firing. For just a moment, there's silence. Then the Germans open fire again from a second position. The man adjusts his direction. Still running. Still alone. He throws another grenade. Another explosion. He's hit. He goes down. But he gets back up. Blood is streaming down his uniform. He throws a third grenade. The second machine gun position goes silent. Then he walks into the German position and starts firing his rifle at point-blank range, killing the remaining Germans, making absolutely certain his friends can advance safely. When it's over, he's been hit by at least 8 bullets. He collapses. His friends rush to him. He dies minutes later, at 19 years old, having just killed or wounded over 60 German soldiers by himself. His name was Private John R. McKinney. And this is only one story of ultimate sacrifice from World War II. Welcome to Echoes of W2. Today we're going to tell you about soldiers who made a choice that most of us can't imagine, who looked at certain death and walked toward it anyway, because it was the only way to save their friends. These stories sound like Hollywood movies. The heroism seems impossible, exaggerated, too dramatic to be real, but every detail is documented. Every action witnessed, every sacrifice real. Your history teacher probably never told you these names, but by the end of this video, you'll never forget them. Before we tell these stories, we need to understand what we're talking about, because the word hero gets used so casually today that it's lost meaning. We call athletes heroes. We call celebrities heroes. We use the word for anyone who does something we admire. But there's a specific kind of heroism that transcends normal bravery. It's the moment when someone knowingly, deliberately sacrifices their life to save others, not taking a risk that might result in death, not being brave in the face of danger, but consciously choosing certain death because it's the only way others can live. This happens in war more than we talk about. Soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to shield their friends. Soldiers charging machine gun nests alone to create an opening for their unit. Pilots staying in damaged aircraft to steer them away from populated areas, instead of ejecting to safety. These aren't split-second reflexes. These are conscious decisions. The person knows they're about to die. They have time to understand what they're doing, and they do it anyway. During World War II, the United States military awarded 464 Medals of Honor. The Medal of Honor is America's highest military decoration, given for valor in action against an enemy force. More than half of those 464 medals were awarded posthumously. The recipient died in the action that earned them the medal. Many of those posthumous medals were for this specific type of sacrifice, the conscious choice to die so others could live. Let's talk about why this happens. Because on the surface, it seems irrational. Why would anyone choose to die? Isn't the survival instinct the strongest human drive? Combat creates bonds between soldiers that most civilians can't understand. You live together, fight together, depend on each other for survival. Your squad mates aren't just colleagues, they're brothers. Closer than family in some ways. Because you've been through things together that no one else can understand. When you're in combat and your brothers are in danger, the calculation changes. It's not about abstract duty or patriotism. It's immediate and personal. These specific people, who you know and care about, are about to die unless someone does something. And sometimes, the only thing that can be done requires someone to die doing it. A grenade lands in your foxhole. Someone has to cover it with their body or everyone dies. A machine gun is killing your squad. Someone has to charge it directly or everyone gets picked off one by one. In that moment, someone makes a choice. Usually, it's instantaneous. No time for philosophical debate. But it's still a choice. Jump on the grenade or don't. Charge the machine gun or don't. The men who made that choice, who said yes when everything in their biology screamed no, are the subjects of today's stories. Let's start with Private Desmond Doss, because his story is so extraordinary that it seems impossible. And unlike the others we'll discuss today, Doss survived his war. Desmond Doss was a conscientious objector. He was a Seventh-day Adventist who believed killing was wrong. When he was drafted in 1942, he refused to carry a weapon. He wouldn't train with rifles. He wouldn't learn to shoot. He insisted he would serve as a medic, saving lives instead of taking them. The army didn't know what to do with him. Other soldiers harassed him, called him a coward. Officers tried to get him discharged as mentally unfit. His own squad members said they wouldn't trust him in combat because he refused to carry a weapon. Doss endured all of this. He completed basic training, still refusing to touch a gun. He was assigned to a medical unit and deployed to the Pacific Theater as a combat medic. April 1945. The Battle of Okinawa, one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific War. Doss's unit was ordered to assault a 400-foot cliff called Hacksaw Ridge. The Japanese were dug in at the top with machine guns, mortars, and artillery. It was a killing zone. The American assault reached the top of the ridge but was met with devastating fire. Men were hit everywhere. The attack stalled. Wounded soldiers were screaming for medics. The situation was chaos. Doss moved through the battle treating wounded men. He was unarmed. No rifle, no pistol, not even a knife. Just his medical supplies and his faith. Japanese soldiers were shooting at him. Artillery was exploding around him. But he kept working, dragging wounded men to cover, bandaging wounds, administering morphine. The American forces were forced to retreat. They pulled back down the cliff, leaving their wounded behind because carrying them down under fire was impossible. The wounded men would be left for the Japanese to kill or capture. Doss refused to leave. He stayed on top of Hacksaw Ridge, alone, surrounded by Japanese forces. And one by one, he dragged wounded soldiers to the edge of the cliff. He rigged a rope system and lowered them down to safety. Then he went back for another. And another. He did this for 5 hours. Through the night. Under constant danger. The Japanese knew he was there, but in the darkness and chaos, they couldn't pinpoint his location. Every time they got close, Doss would hide, wait for them to pass, then continue his work. By dawn, he'd lowered 75 wounded men to safety. 75 soldiers who would have died on that ridge. All saved by an unarmed medic who refused to leave them behind. Doss would continue serving through the rest of the Okinawa campaign. He was eventually wounded by a grenade and evacuated. He survived the war and lived until 2006. President Truman personally awarded him the Medal of Honor. The same military that had tried to discharge him as unfit now recognized him as one of the war's greatest heroes. Doss's story became widely known after the 2016 film Hacksaw Ridge. But even before that, it was legendary among military historians, because it demonstrates something profound. Heroism isn't about violence or aggression. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for others. Doss made the same choice as soldiers who charged machine guns or jumped on grenades. He chose to stay in a lethal situation, accepting that he'd probably die, because it was the only way to save his friends. The only difference is that Doss survived. Most who made that choice didn't. Let's go back to Private John R. McKinney, whose story opened this video. Because while Doss's heroism was defensive, saving lives through medicine, McKinney's was offensive. Saving lives through violence. May 11, 1945. The Philippines. McKinney was part of a small patrol near Tayabas. They were scouting Japanese positions when they were ambushed. Dozens of Japanese soldiers opened fire from concealed positions. The Americans were outnumbered and outgunned. McKinney's patrol took cover, but they were pinned down. The Japanese were advancing, preparing to overrun their position. In minutes, the entire patrol would be dead. McKinney made his decision. He stood up and charged the nearest Japanese position, alone, across open ground, into concentrated enemy fire. He killed 4 Japanese soldiers with his rifle. Then his rifle jammed. He pulled out his pistol and killed some more. Then he was out of ammunition. The Japanese rushed him with bayonets. McKinney fought them hand to hand. He killed 3 more with his bare hands and a bayonet he'd taken from a dead Japanese soldier. Then more Japanese soldiers arrived. McKinney was wounded, bleeding from multiple wounds. But he kept fighting. He picked up a Japanese rifle and continued shooting. He killed more enemy soldiers. He held the position alone while his patrol escaped. When it was over, McKinney had killed at least 38 Japanese soldiers by himself. He'd been wounded multiple times, but he'd given his patrol time to retreat and regroup. Time to call for support. Time to survive. McKinney was evacuated and survived his wounds. He received the Medal of Honor from President Truman, but he struggled with what he'd done for the rest of his life. In interviews years later, he said he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like he'd done what he had to do to save his friends. He died in 1997, having spent 50 years trying to reconcile the man he became for a few minutes in the Philippines with the man he wanted to be. Now let's talk about Audie Murphy. You might know his name. He became a movie star after the war, appearing in over 40 films. But before Hollywood, he was the most decorated American soldier of World War II. Murphy was from Texas, born into poverty. He lied about his age to enlist at 17. He was small, barely met the height requirement, and looked even younger than he was. Officers initially rejected him as too young and frail for combat, but Murphy was a natural soldier. He had extraordinary reflexes, perfect aim, and most importantly, absolute fearlessness. He fought across North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and France. He was wounded 3 times. He killed an estimated 240 enemy soldiers during the war. January 26, 1945. Near Holzois, France, Murphy's company was defending a position against a German counterattack. 6 German tanks and 250 infantry were advancing toward their position. The American forces had only about 40 men. They were outnumbered 6-1 with no anti-tank weapons capable of stopping German tanks. Murphy ordered his men to retreat to better defensive positions, but Murphy didn't retreat. He climbed onto a burning tank destroyer that had been hit by German fire. The vehicle was on fire, could explode at any moment. It had a functioning machine gun. Murphy began firing. He called in artillery strikes on his own position, directing fire to within 50 yards of where he was standing. German infantry was all around him. He was completely exposed on top of a burning vehicle. He stood there for an hour, firing the machine gun, directing artillery, killing German soldiers who got close. The Germans shot at him constantly but couldn't hit him. Or maybe they did hit him, and he just kept fighting. Reports differ. When he finally ran out of ammunition, he'd killed or wounded an estimated 50 German soldiers. He'd broken the German attack. His company counterattacked and drove the Germans back. Murphy was wounded in the leg during this action. He refused treatment until the battle was won. He received the Medal of Honor for this action, adding to the dozens of other medals he'd already earned. After the war, Murphy struggled with what we now call PTSD. He had nightmares, violent flashbacks, difficulty adjusting to civilian life. He was honest about this, unusually so for his era. He talked publicly about combat trauma and advocated for better mental health care for veterans. He died in a plane crash in 1971, at age 45. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Murphy's story is different from Doss or McKinney. He didn't die in his moment of ultimate heroism, but he made the same choice. He stood on that burning tank destroyer, knowing he'd probably die there. He accepted certain death as the price for saving his company. The fact that he survived, that bullets somehow missed him while he stood exposed for an hour, was luck. The choice to put himself in that position was courage. Now let's talk about the soldiers who didn't survive. Because for every Doss or Murphy who lived to tell their story, there were countless others who made the same choice and died in the making of it. Corporal Tony Stein, Marines, Iwo Jima, February 19, 1945. The first day of the invasion, Stein's unit was pinned down on the beach by Japanese machine gun fire. Men were dying all around him. Stein had fabricated a custom weapon before the invasion. He'd taken a machine gun from a wrecked aircraft and modified it so he could carry and fire it like a rifle. It was heavier and more powerful than any weapon an infantryman normally carried. He stood up and charged the nearest Japanese pillbox. Alone, firing his custom weapon, he destroyed the position. Then he did it again and again. 8 times during the first day, Stein single-handedly destroyed Japanese defensive positions. He made 8 separate trips back to the beach to get more ammunition and to carry wounded Marines to safety. 8 times he went into the kill zone, helped his friends, and came back. Stein survived the first day of Iwo Jima, but on March 1st, 12 days into the battle, he was killed by Japanese sniper fire while covering his squad's advance. He was 23 years old. He received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Then there's Private First Class Jacklyn Lucas. He was 17 years old at Iwo Jima. He'd lied about his age to enlist. On February 20th, 1 day into the battle, Lucas was advancing with his unit when they were attacked by Japanese soldiers in a trench. 2 grenades landed near Lucas and his squad. Lucas threw himself on both grenades simultaneously, covering them with his body. He was trying to save his entire squad from the blast. The grenades exploded. Lucas was blown into the air, severely wounded. Shrapnel ripped through his body. He had over 250 pieces of shrapnel embedded in his chest, arms, and face. But he didn't die. The position of his body, the angle of the explosions, pure luck. Somehow he survived. He was evacuated, underwent multiple surgeries, and lived. He received the Medal of Honor at age 17, the youngest Marine to ever receive it. Lucas lived until 2008. He spent the rest of his life with shrapnel still embedded in his body, too close to vital organs to be safely removed. He carried the physical evidence of his sacrifice for 63 years. Staff Sergeant Lucian Adams, Italy, October 28, 1944. Adams's platoon was pinned down by 3 German machine gun nests. They couldn't advance. They couldn't retreat. They were being slowly cut to pieces. Adams stood up and charged the first machine gun nest. Alone, he killed 9 German soldiers and destroyed the position. He moved to the second position, killed more Germans. Then the third position, more Germans killed. He did all of this while wounded, having been hit in the leg early in his charge. When it was over, he'd killed 28 German soldiers by himself and destroyed 3 machine gun positions. His platoon was able to advance. Adams survived his wounds and received the Medal of Honor. Private First Class James Anderson Jr., Okinawa, February 21, 1945. Anderson was in a shell crater with 4 other Marines when a Japanese soldier threw a grenade into their position. Anderson shouted a warning, then threw himself on the grenade. The explosion killed him instantly. The other 4 Marines survived. Anderson was 20 years old. He received the Medal of Honor posthumously. He was the first African-American Marine to receive the Medal of Honor. The list goes on. Hundreds of soldiers who made this choice. Most of their names are forgotten, except by military historians and the descendants of the men they saved. So why are we telling these stories? What's the point of recounting these horrors and sacrifices from 80 years ago? First, because these people deserve to be remembered. They gave everything. The absolute maximum sacrifice a human can make. And most of them are completely forgotten. Their names appear in military records and on memorials, but the average person has never heard of them. Second, because these stories challenge our assumptions about heroism. We live in a culture that celebrates individual achievement, success, winning, but these soldiers embody a different kind of greatness, the greatness of self-sacrifice, of putting others before yourself to the ultimate degree. Third, because these stories remind us what people are capable of. In our everyday lives, most of us will never face situations this extreme, but these soldiers show us that when pushed to the absolute limit, humans can transcend self-preservation, can choose death for others rather than life for themselves. This isn't just military history. This is a testament to human potential, to what becomes possible when love for others overcomes fear of death. Fourth, because understanding sacrifice helps us appreciate peace. These men died in wars that could have been prevented, that resulted from failures of diplomacy and wisdom. Their sacrifice was noble, but the need for their sacrifice was tragic. Remembering them means committing to preventing future wars, where new generations will have to make these choices. Finally, because their families deserve recognition. Behind every soldier who died saving others was a family who lost someone. Parents who lost a son. Wives who lost husbands. Children who lost fathers. These families carried that loss for the rest of their lives. When Private John R. McKinney died from his wounds in 1945, his mother received a letter from one of the men he saved. The letter said, "Your son died so I could come home to my family. I will never forget him. I will make sure my children know his name." That's what these stories are about. Names that should never be forgotten. Sacrifices that should always be honored. Choices that remind us what humans are capable of when they love others more than they fear death. This is Echoes of W2. Private John R. McKinney. Private Desmond Doss. Audie Murphy. Corporal Tony Stein. Private First Class Jacklyn Lucas. Staff Sergeant Lucian Adams. Private First Class James Anderson Jr. These are just a few names from hundreds who made the same choice, who looked at certain death and walked toward it anyway, because it was the only way to save their friends. Your history teacher probably taught you about generals and presidents, about strategies and battles, about the big picture of World War II, but they probably didn't tell you about these men, about the 19-year-old who charged 3 machine gun nests alone, about the conscientious objector who saved 75 men without carrying a weapon, about the 17-year-old who threw himself onto grenades. Now you know. Now you know their names. Now you know what they did. And hopefully, you'll never forget them. Because heroism that feels like a movie was real. These men really did these things. Really made these choices. Really died so their friends could live. And that's something worth remembering.